big welcome to Empower Her podcast, where we get to speak to the 22 authors of Empower Her. And today we have an amazing woman, Cassandra Cassie Carson from Texas, USA. She is an administrative officer with the Department of Justice, where she combines over 13 years of cross-industry experience with a passion for building strong, people-focused teams. With a master's degree in human resource management from the University of Oklahoma, she brings both academic expertise and real-world insight to every role she takes on. A big welcome to Empower Her podcast. A little bit extra outside the office, she finds her greatest joy in spending time with her two children. Together, they love being outdoors and caring for their family's mini zoo. I think I can relate to that, Cassie, which keeps life lively, fun, and full of adventure. So I think we need to hear a little bit about that zoo as well. But before we bring you on, I just want to read a little bit from the book. So your chapter is chapter 6 on page 61. Interesting, we have a couple of sixes there. And it's called Growing Pains. So we're going to find out a little bit more about growing pains, because we can use growing pains in so many different ways in our life. And your quote, work like hell and fight for the things you care about so fiercely that it inspires others to fight for them too. In this day and age, we're hearing, don't hustle, don't push, don't do this, it's all too much. But your quote is work like hell and fight for the things you care about so fiercely that it inspires others to fight for them too. And I love this because I must admit, I'm a bit of a passionate person as well. So I'm more likely to want to fight for those things, because I think when people see passion, then they want to jump on board with it. But I'm going to ask you why you used that quote. Why is that in this chapter, and why this chapter for Empower Her, this chapter out of everything you could write from your life? Thank you. A big welcome.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here, and excited that I was able to be a part of this journey with 21 other incredible women. You're right that the chapter, choosing it, the quote itself, fight for the, fight like hell and do it so fiercely that others want to be a part of it. I think throughout my career, especially in a law enforcement, male dominated, most would say it's getting where the numbers are a little more even. But I will say that I have always felt like, we still have to work hard. Even as women, we have come a long way, and there has been some societal changes, as far as the terminology. We're used to hearing about glass ceilings and whatnot. But I think when I started my career, over 13 years ago in this organization, I knew right away that I was going to have to work really hard. I was going to have to be good at what I did. I was going to have to also listen, learn from others. And then when there was something, that I knew needed to be changed, that I needed to work really hard in order to prove why that change needed to exist. So I'm really big on reputation. Especially when we welcome, new employees to our office, our organization, and we're onboarding. I stress that the way that you work in these first 60 to 90 days really changes a person's perspective on the type of employee you're going to be. And I always joke that, where we work at, we're still pretty a judgmental group, where in those first 60 to 90 days, we kind of make a decision on whether this person is going to last, if they're going to make it, if they're going to have, the work ethic that we're looking for, because a lot of the jobs are not, glamorous. A lot of it is something as simple as getting the mail out today, and working with FedEx and mailing sensitive items, across the world. And so some days that might be your morning, and it's not necessarily putting someone, behind bars or working on a case that's going to get some kind of resolution. So I learned early on that there was also, differences in the hierarchy a little bit. And in order to make change, you have to have buy-in. And that starts, in my opinion, with the work, the front line, the workforce, the people that are in it every single day. And you have to have their buy-in in order to get some of these, tasks done. And so you yourself have to be the one that also shows up, works hard, cares about these people, because they're not going to buy into something that doesn't have, a feeling behind it. At least that's my perspective. And so when I think of that, I think of the other young women that I mentor at my organization. And when I tell them, work your butt off, like work really, really hard. And then when there's something that you want, that this is the hill you want to die on, as they say, then go for it, and go for it 100%, and know that I'm going to have your back. But make sure that we're making, the majority of the right decisions to get there. And so that's kind of what inspired me to do this chapter, was to kind of think of what my leadership development has been like over the last 13 years, and the different mentors that I've had and different teams that I've had, and tasks. And what I think, the title that I came up with is still something that I feel I resonate with today, which is it's growing pains. And sometimes the growing pains hurt. Sometimes they're longer than we want them to be. But what I usually am able to achieve after that is so much more rewarding. And I learned something new. I learned something about others. I learned different strategies, or, just from all of our experiences, you learn what works well, what doesn't. And so that's kind of where I thought, from humble beginnings, like I was just a young girl from, a small town in Oklahoma, and, didn't come from a lot. I mean, we were fine, but I think sometimes I pinch myself that this is where I'm at today. And then I stop and think, well, how did I get here? And then I recognize that a lot of it was that support system we have in the family, and friends around us. But a lot of it comes down to my own personal drive and ambition, where I always felt like I was drawn to leadership. I felt like I wanted to make a difference. I felt like I wanted to do, really good things. And I wanted to inspire others to do really good things, and especially women, because I think, as several women wrote in Empower Her, we're our own worst critics. We're the hardest on ourselves. We juggle so much, and then we're the first to sometimes cut each other down. And I think that that's not entirely fair, because there's a lot of women out there that are just trying to, make a difference, be a good example, a role model for, whether it's a kid or a child in their life, or just to do good. Because,
Yeah.
I truly believe that, we're here for a short amount of time, and the impact that we're going to leave, what does that look like for me, for my kids, for the organization that I've spent now almost, 15 years at. Um, but, and I could talk forever. So, Catherine, please tell me. But that's where, this chapter to me was just kind of a reflection of, if I can make it, like, and I haven't had as many struggles as some of the other women in Empower Her have. But I also don't think it's fair to compare our stories and where we started. I think just know that, never forget where you come from,
Yeah.
but you can change the
Yeah.
course, of your life.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So
And
get on a separate tangent.
our story's not finished. Our story's not finished. So we
Right.
mightn't have had as many struggles yet. Who knows?
Yes.
But it's never finished. But even when you start to look at the struggles each day that you have, each day there are those challenges that you come up against that create those opportunities. There's three things I sort of wrote down in amongst
Okay.
what you were saying. And of course, for our listeners, a lot of this isn't in the book, and that's why we're having this podcast, so we can find out a bit more about our amazing authors. And I met you on Leading Ladies Lunches, so you came on as a guest speaker, and it was just incredible to meet you through Sneha. So between you were saying, employees, they come on between 30 to 60 days, you see them. Do you know, uh, because a lot of times there's a 3 month probation. I don't know what that's like with you, but
Mhm.
we took it to 6 months because I found out at about 5 months, that's when we really saw people can hold things together for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. But the
Mhm.
5 month mark, that's where we really found out who the person was. Um,
Yeah.
so, so just quickly, because there's a few things I want to remember here, just quickly,
Yeah.
would you agree with that?
I would, yeah. So our organization, it actually used to be only a year, but we do a lot of training on the front end. And so, for example, that can take up 6 months worth of training, which means then we're only seeing a person for 6 months outside of that. And so then we bumped it to 2 years. And I will say you're spot on because we saw the same thing where it's like, well, someone, they can put on a good show for 60 to 90 days, but can they, go longer than that? Or when adversity hits or we have some kind of, challenge, like how do they react to that?
Yeah,
Because that's not always constant. So I definitely agree with you that, you can come right out of the gate and doing all this amazing work. But, what does this look like in 18 months? And then we use a bunch of different, competencies, if you will.
yeah.
One of our big ones is like emotional maturity and judgment, and
Mm,
those are
yeah,
important because after our probationary period those aren't seen as necessarily performance matter for us. So
yeah,
it's in those initial months that you're looking for judgment. And
yeah.
for us, we hire a lot of younger professionals, so sometimes on the maturity side we see that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you don't really know what's in their resource kit. What have they built in that toolkit? And of course, going through those 6 months of training, they'll be building that. Amazing that you can do the 2 years. That's fabulous. Like we've got some crazy rules here as well in Australia, and that's why we extended to the 6 months because
Yeah.
of the size of our business that we could. Um, but yeah, I don't believe in 3 months that you can see what an employee is like.
Right.
Yeah. And so, you were saying, you had that great family support. And I do believe because this happened for me, even though I was orphaned and adopted, I had this great family, middle class, loving parents. And I feel that I always thought of them as this big tree. So I think I was able to take more risks because of it. Because if you fell
Hmm.
off, you could just climb back up. And it's not until you do things that you never thought you would do, like have a job like you're working at now, Cassie.
Hmm.
You've worked into that job and you can believe that because you had that great family unit that believe in you too. And it doesn't matter where you come from because sometimes when things are really bad, people would do the opposite as well. So there is that strength and there is that fight. Do you have that fight in you for the things
Yes.
that you want
Yeah.
and that you care about? So I love that. Uh, how many people want? Yeah, and just at the end, you were talking about women in the workplace. And I sort of wrote a little note there. You know, most people, no matter what the job is, they want to go in, they want to do the job to the best of their ability. They want to take their paycheck, they want to come home and they want to look after their family. Um, that's that's how I feel. But they get into the workplace and even though they want to do their best, there's a million things, whether it's from top down or just that middle management that can absolutely um, topple the way that they thought about that business. Sometimes it's just one word, but building that resource kit, and I speak about in my chapter, don't even know why I put it in. I kind of do now, but something that happened way back when I first started work. But it's those things that we either fight through or we run from. I think that help determine those growing pains, how many
Yeah.
growing pains we're likely to have. And growing pains are good because that's where the gold is, isn't it?
Hmm. I
If we
agree.
do, if
Yes.
we stop our children and our young adults from going through some of those tougher things, because a bad leader teaches us what we will never do. They
Right.
show us. They show us. what we
Yeah.
won't do. And a good leader can lead the way, but sometimes you've got to experience a bad leader so you know a good leader as well.
Yeah.
Um,
100%.
and I'm just going to read a little bit from the book here. People hear about your job responsibilities. Now, we were just having a little bit of a chat about it. I don't know if you can share any of that with anyone
Yeah.
here today,
Yeah.
but in the many roles that you juggle, people usually respond with something like, "That sounds like a tough job. How do you do it? How do you balance it all?" My usual response was, I don't know. I didn't want the job. It just kind of fell to me. I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time. And then one day, a good friend and mentor overheard me saying this to a colleague. After the conversation ended, he pulled me aside and said, "Stop telling people you didn't want the job and quit telling them luck had a role in it." I have a little thing for
Mhm.
luck, labor under correct knowledge. You got lucky because you were the right person. But tell us a little bit more about that, because this is where we start with growing pains.
Yes, yes. So, yeah, responsibility wise, I think, you know, my day varies a lot, and it can be a day full of, I have a lot of administrative personnel under me. And so, a lot of across our organization at the FBI, I handle all of the, you know, I would say sometimes not the operational tough calls, but I'm responsible for building management oversight. All of our buildings are leased, and we have 12 alone in the Dallas office. So any given day there can be multiple issues at one of those buildings, including our headquarters city building that we're in. I also oversee our financial, our budget, which we get our own individual budget for our field office. And so oftentimes people are coming to me with, we want to buy this, we want to go to this conference, we need this new gear. And then I also oversee our, IT and our electronic technician program, which is a lot of our, infrastructure internally, but also, communications between other offices and, the capabilities that we have. And then all the while, like we have to be mindful of the things that we're buying, especially from certain countries where, we may be looking out for any kind of espionage type stuff. And so then I'm always putting limits to things. And then you look at the HR side, which is all the performance matters. And so
Mm,
sometimes like we were just discussing a couple of weeks ago, unfortunately, we had a removal with an employee. And so sometimes my day is like that. And so I think oftentimes people within the organization kind of know that I have more days of telling people, no, we can't do that. Or bad news, right? Like sometimes I'm the bad news bearer, but I have a lot of, oversight above me as well. Like I'm very fortunate to have a great boss. The leadership teams that we have built and have started to and continue to build, are very much with the top cover, and there's a lot of meetings, as you can imagine, just like with your organization before we make these moves. But ultimately I'm kind of the one that oversees those teams. And so oftentimes people are, you will just be like, oh, like who would want your job? And I'm like, that's a good
mm,
question. But I also see a lot of our accomplishments and achievements. And most importantly, I'm just proud of the people that I work with. Like these are really good people that care about their country, they care about the mission. And a lot of our roles are on the support side. And we're not the ones out there doing, the really tough type of work. But I also tell my team the work that we do is also, it's just as valuable, because to get equipment, we need our vehicles that we oversee. We have 450 vehicles that, I have a fleet team of a couple of mechanics and a fleet manager, and we keep people on the road every day, and we move, stuff from one location to another. I have a huge support staff that oversees and helps with squad support. And so I'm always like making sure that my team sees that value, feels that value, even though they're the ones, again, maybe not running an investigation, but they are, the people behind the scene, and you got to have them too. And we play a very critical role. And so, yeah, when they're like, how do you balance it all? They also know that I'm a mom and I have two younger children. And so I was very involved in our parent teacher organization last year. I was a board member. And so it's like, how do you come into work and like triage that someone hit our barrier to get in and it's damaged their vehicle, damaged our barrier, and then, oh, by the way, we have severe weather in Texas. So I've got to keep a lookout on the storms and make sure that everyone's being, communicated about what our precautionary stuff is. And then I'm like, oh, shoot, my son has a 5:30 soccer game tonight, and I would say that that's like, it's like, how do you balance it all,
Mm.
and fortunately, I have such a good team around me. I could not do what I do without them. They give me a lot of support, but it goes back to like I've earned that from them, and that's where my like I try to work so hard and fight for them too. So when I say like fight like hell, like I'm gonna put I'm gonna put everything on the line for them because they would do the same for me. And if we're righteous, we're righteous. When we're
Yeah.
not, we'll have a conversation. But yeah, and that's just a few. I have a lot. I have several others. So sometimes it's we're divided up based on our programs and our threats. And I kind of have all the, you know, uh, not so fun stuff, I guess you could say. But hopefully that helps kind of give,
Yeah.
the listeners a better idea of my story too when they're reading it. And it's like, how does she balance it out? Or,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a
So
juggle, but it also keeps it exciting, doesn't it?
it does. Yeah. I mean, I feel challenged. I'm never not challenged. You
Mm.
never know what the day is going to bring, and I've continued to grow. Like you said, like I learned something, every day about myself, about others, how to be a better leader, how to be a better employee, how to be a better mom. And a lot of that is just working with others and hearing others' journeys and what they've been through and what they've overcome. And as silly as it sounds, like we're all in this together, we've been,
Yes, we
you
are.
know,
It's one world. We're all in this together, and we were having a little bit of a chat about that, what's happening in the world right now. But
yes.
you've got why we need to stop saying I didn't want the job. So if it's okay, I'm just going to read a little bit from here.
Yes. Okay.
First, you either want to be a leader or you don't. It doesn't just fall to you. So I know that sometimes in some businesses, you're a great worker, and so next minute they want to put you into that leadership role, and you may not feel like you're ready for it. But you've got to make
Mhm.
that decision. You're saying you either want it or you don't want it. Be
Right.
really clear with it. Second, other people likely want your job. This is true. You know, other people
Yeah.
likely want your job. And when you make it sound like it was luck or it was an easy path, which is probably not true, it frustrates your peers and competitors, maybe even your friends. And so
Yes.
this is true because a lot of the times when good things happen, we push it down. We're being what we think is humble, making
Right.
out that it was just easy. And so for someone else who's been dying to do that, who's been climbing up the ladder to do that,
Yes.
then feels quite hurt that someone
Hmm.
who doesn't even want this has got this. So just
Yes.
imagine what it does to that employee as well.
Yes.
And lastly, if you're actually a decent person, boss and leader, it's annoying for others to hear you dismiss your role by saying things like, oh, I didn't really want the job, or I just got lucky. What I should have said back then was something like, yes, it's a tough job, but I love it. I work hard, I set goals, I have a great team, and I delegate well, at least most days. And then you go on to let us know some more information. And I think that's great. I think it's really, really important because sometimes things happen to us in life and we just, people go, oh, she's lucky, you got lucky. Yeah, labor under correct knowledge. I worked really hard.
Yes.
Worked
Yeah.
really hard for this. People have noticed what I've done. And I think
Yes.
that's really, really important to acknowledge so that if someone is there and they do want to come up the ladder and they do look to you, they can see there is a path. If it's
Yes.
just luck, there's no path.
Yes.
Um, and it's more frustrating. So I think that's fantastic. And then you go into the fear factor. Can I
Yeah.
balance it all? Do I really want this? Am I good enough? Can I lead? How do you how did you get through the fear factor?
Yeah, so I think, at the time I had some really good mentors around me, and I cannot stress that enough is finding someone that, will call you on your strengths and your weaknesses and what you can work on and what you can be better at. Most people, when I took the job of the administrative officer, I was quite young. And that was often said, and so I always kind of had that in the back of my mind. That most of the people that I supervised, sometimes, I was maybe half their age. And so I knew that my approach and my conversations, I could not come across as like this, we can laugh, but like millennial that knows it all, like these people, my employees have had experiences that are quite different than mine. They've been in this organization a lot longer than me. As a country, they have went through different things as they worked for us. So, I had some, and that was tough for me when I first started out. That I had this one employee who, was just really bitter and it was really affecting other teams. And I was pretty new and I really didn't want to address the issue. I didn't want to rock the boat, but then the more that I worked with my mentor and my coach, it was like, listen, this is a turning point. And if you don't do this the right way, and if you don't handle it, you're going to lose a lot more people than you are by not addressing this. And that became very pivotal. And I remember that in my career early on, that the conversation I ended up having with this really difficult employee at the time, when I finally prepared for it, which just like on our leading ladies, and I've mentioned this before, having a script is something that I very much rely on. I make sure that I'm prepared for meetings, especially personnel meetings. I try to have my bullet points ready. I always tell people it's your meeting. So it's my meeting and this is how it's going to go, and sometimes you have to course correct. But that took a lot of practice. And again, I give that to the mentors that were around me, leaders that have had to make much more harder decisions, unfavorable, made them not well liked. And I began to understand that I'm not doing this job to be liked, I'm sure you've seen it, but my old boss had something that said, not everyone's going to like you. You're not pizza, So like, and that always like sticks out to me too, that, we're not going to make everybody
Yeah.
happy, but that's what real leaders do, I think, is that sometimes you have to make the tough calls and you definitely have to have the tough conversations. But I credit that to the people that sought me out. And that's kind of what I do now too, Catherine, is like I seek people out that I think have potential and that I want to see do well, whether it's with my organization or just in life. And I try to in a organic way be like, hey, I've been there. If you want some advice, if you ever want someone to talk to, I see something in you. Because that's what someone did for me. I did not see myself in this role until someone sought me out and said, I see you in it. And I'm like, really? And so from there, I've really worked hard to still keep mentors around me, still look for advice, seek out advice. And then I look for people that are open to hearing me out and letting me mentor them. So that's my biggest thing, is that someone gave me a shot. Someone saw something in me, made me believe in myself. And then I was like, I can do this. Like, I'm not, so
Yeah.
hopefully that answers the question.
I love that. And so true, that someone saw something in me. And it's so important that we also do that for others. I say, you know, you've got to believe in yourself too, not just wait for someone else to believe in you
Right.
to get something done. But when there is someone, when there is a mentor, it makes a world of difference. So seek out those mentors, seek out the people who are doing what you would like to do, and see if
Yeah.
you can be mentored by them. So, so important. Most people in those positions aren't going to say no.
Right.
They
Yeah.
know the power of it. So I think that's really important. And you said about preparing for meetings. I think it's so hugely important, especially the difficult conversations.
Yeah.
Um, and I know when I had the business, I would always want to ask something like, do you know why we're meeting today? Do you know,
Right.
because I wanted to know where they were.
Mm-hmm.
Do
Yeah.
they know what's going wrong?
Yeah. Yes.
And if
Mm-hmm.
they
Yeah.
don't,
Let's,
it's going to be a bit
yeah.
of a tougher conversation. If they have recognized it, then great, we can get into it and, come up with some solutions.
Yes. Yeah. Kind of
So,
setting that stage, setting the scene. So, take that anxiety away. That's what I've learned too, is that if it's not going to go well, just go ahead and tell them, don't
Yeah,
belabor for 20 minutes and then be talking about all the good and fun things and then be like, okay, so
yeah,
the real reason we're here,
yeah,
like
yeah,
don't do that to people.
yeah.
So,
Jump into the meeting. Don't confuse them. Don't
yeah.
sandwich it. Oh my
Yes.
gosh. And then
Yeah.
they walk out going, oh, the last thing they heard is good, good, good. The
Yes.
last thing they should
Yes.
be hearing
Yeah.
is we'll have a meeting next Friday and
Yes.
let's see how it went this week.
Yes,
Or
exactly.
whatever time you've given them to rectify it. Um, and that was a very confusing thing. I think that sandwich, it was a very confusing. People come in, they're having great
Yeah.
conversation, then they're whammed, and then they've got this great thing to walk away with.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Um, of course, it's nice to be polite, but just asking them, do you know why we're having
Yeah,
this meeting today? That just
that helps.
sets a good scene. What's a good scene setter for you, Cassie, for our listeners?
Yeah, so I think kind of similar to you, if I know, they likely know, right? Like you're saying that this is the second or third time when they're seeing me, they've already kind of been chatted over it. So when they're with me, I actually do just that where I say, listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I do not think you're going to like how this conversation's going to go. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes saying what I need to say, getting my points across, and then I am going to turn it over to you. And I'm going to allow you to ask some questions, and I might not have all the answers. I might have to get back to you, but I really need you to listen and hear me out on these first few bullet points, and I have found that it actually really does help the anxiety a little bit because it takes away, like you said, like I used to, you want to say, hey, how's it going? How was your weekend? And then it's really hard to transition to,
Yeah,
so why we're here is because you're really doing a bad job on this project right now, and so
yeah,
that was really tough for me because I was also nicknamed right away that I'm too nice. So a lot of people were worried, because she's so nice and she's too nice. And so I don't see that as a weakness. So I tell people like, yeah, I'm nice. I'm genuinely a nice person, but even nice people have their limits.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so, I think setting those boundaries. So if I just try not to beat around the bush, like you said. So
yeah.
sometimes I do that. Do you know why we're here today?
Mm.
But I also don't do any of the small talk. And I
No,
like to get
that's
my,
right.
like we
There's
said,
an
your
amazing
script,
formula that we do use at
Yeah.
our leadership retreats. We've got one a
Yeah.
year. We've got one coming up at the end of the world. And there's a great formula for those conversations so that
Yeah.
it ends with both parties knowing exactly what's happening going
Yeah.
forward and
And like you
when the
said,
next meeting is,
expectations.
whether it's the
Yep.
next day, whether it's in 3 days' time, whatever. But it's
Yep.
really,
Setting
really,
those
really important.
expectations. Yeah.
So for those of
I
you
agree.
listening, it is about not walking past what we don't accept. It is important to get onto that as fast as possible, but it may not be in that second, in that moment, in front of everyone. It might be, oh, that we need to have that meeting in an hour's time. You need to prepare. You need to prepare for difficult conversations so it doesn't go into the emotional zone. So it works with those facts. So important. You deal with so many people.
Yes. Yeah.
Incredible. Um, and then, like you said, it's even if you're not a tough out there person, when you've got
Mhm.
that formula, it works. You don't need to be. We just need to
Right.
stick to follow with that formula.
Yeah.
So leadership lessons learned in the book, you've got three most important traits that you've learned and that you value. Can I read those three?
Yes, please.
One is being a good listener, and we know how important it is not to just listen to how you're going to respond, but to listen to be curious. Empathy is an important leadership lesson, and accountability. So I don't know if you would like to touch on any of those with us today.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, yes. So for me, I also think kind of all three of these go hand in hand. And that's like the last example, we were talking about bad news. Like it's still hard for me. Like after I have a conversation, and I think that is because I am empathetic, and I think it's super important to you know, have empathy because if you're a good listener, you're learning about the people you work with. And that's the hardest challenge for me is I really try to get to know all of my employees. And then if something does happen and you're having to have that hard conversation, it's tough because I genuinely probably care and like this person. And I know they're not going to like what I have to say and it's going to be hurtful and hard. But accountability was big for me when I stepped in, especially in a government organization. And so I do my best to try to hold people accountable because the government is also made up of some really great people that are very hard workers and they just care about public service. And so I think, what I've learned from not just my leadership role, but other leaders around me is that, leaders that hold their people accountable, they are just generally more respected and they
Yeah.
actually are more liked, even if there's a disagreement, even if it's an employee that unfortunately, maybe had to have a conversation with a leader that didn't go in their favor and there was maybe a disciplinary. At the end of the day, they still said that they respected that leader and thought more of them than the leader that they had previously and did not held them accountable and just kind of did the friend route, and then I think what I've learned, especially with my team, is that it really drives down morale when you have a team. Some of our teams are really small. Like our evidence team is not very big. It's 4 or 5 individuals. And if you have one person that does not do their part, doesn't pull their weight, isn't a team player, they're a negative attitude, what that does to your other 3 or 4 really heavy hitters is I've been there, and that actually is more damaging, than actually having the hard conversation. So that's what I've learned. I'm still not great. I'm always practicing those hard
Yeah.
conversations. So I don't want to make it sound like, it's easy. I have to
Yeah.
do the power pose in my office first and talk myself up. You can do this. And, I know you really like that person, but you can do this. And
Yeah.
and I think that's where the empathy comes in too, right? Because I put myself in that person's shoes and being on the receiving end, how would I want someone to address this with me? I'd want them to give me an opportunity to talk. I'd want them to give me an opportunity to be respected as the same individual. And so that's kind of where I think it sounds simple, but it's that long old like treat others how you want to be treated,
Yeah.
and that seems to
Yeah.
go a long ways. So
Yeah. And that's why I believe there is a formula for everything, and that's why I love the formula as well for those conversations. But these three traits are all transferable, and so even if you're not leading a team, you might
yes,
be at home, you might be a mother, you might be a partner, being a good listener, having empathy, and being accountable is so important. That your children look up to you. And if you say you're going to do something and then you don't do it because you're too busy, well, what about when they say they're going to do something? Will they be making up an excuse for why they're not accountable to it happening? And so I find all these things so important. Every skill that we learn that we're practicing can be accountable at home. And when you're having those difficult conversations at home, or you say one tip I'd give is to learn how to be confrontational without being confrontational. Hard conversations don't need yelling or accusations. Be calm
yeah,
and clear and respectful. And if we keep letting let taking the emotional side of it out, just working on the facts and what we can do, it's amazing the results you get, even with children.
yes,
So, and sometimes we need to have those difficult conversations with ourselves and
yes,
perhaps why am I meeting you here today? What haven't you been up to?
yes,
What did
yep,
you say you're accountable for you haven't done? Um, so it's interesting. And I love it. I love that all these things are transferable because when you are accountable, there is a building of trust. And for your children to be able to trust you, for you to be able to trust you, for your partners to be able to trust you, for your team or your business
hmm,
to trust that you are going to be accountable and do what you say you're going to do is really, really important. So I love that. And you talk about paying it forward. As I move into the next chapter of my journey, I'm focused on mentoring others, especially women. I just love that you've become a little bit of part of leading ladies' lunches because your
yeah,
chapter is a great chapter that helps mentor people to this next step as well. Now I make it a point to bring women in to give them seats at the table to support and cheer them on. I remember going back just before COVID, I was invited on a board and I was the only woman. And so I declined it because now this must be ego, I guess, but I thought, I don't want to be the token woman that they need to put on their
Mm-hmm.
board. But
Yes.
instead, if I took that thought out and went there, I could have made a difference and perhaps brought more women on uh, in the future as well. And not just the woman, but the right person for the right job. And we say that. We say that all the time. Like I'm not one say, oh, you got to have 50% women, or you got to have 50% of this or 50% of that. It should be the best man for the job. And if it is a woman, then take it.
Yes. Yeah, I agree
And
with you.
I think sometimes we can have these different thoughts in our head that aren't really right.
Yes.
It's just that we've heard it elsewhere. So
Yes.
really let it sit and really let it know, can you make a difference if you do accept that? What would it look like? If it is for you, great. If it's not, that's okay too. Uh, Closing thoughts you have here: be true, authentic self, take care of others, and work like hell and fight for those things that you care about so fiercely that inspires others to fight for them too. And I think that's amazing. Be true to yourself. And that's what we're just talking about. If it feels right, do it. You know, be true to yourself. Don't just because you think someone will think you're the token woman. Um, that's just a little bit of ego there. Step into it if it's the right thing for you and take care of others. So thank you for your thoughts, your tips. What you have put into this book is incredible. And we're going to roll the dice because let's see what question you're going to get.
Okay.
Ooh, question number 5. Let's see what question 5 is for you. And just before I do question 5, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience today, Cassie?
No, I'm thankful for you, Catherine, and what you've built. It came in a time in my life when I needed it with you and Sneha. And I just feel so fortunate to be able to kind of put my story out there that you're giving me a seat at the table and carrying that on. So just thank you so much. And I'm hoping question 5 isn't too hard.
Thank you, thank you. All right. Oh, it's the line in the sand. So this should be a good one.
Okay.
What will you no longer tolerate in life, work, or relationships? Where do you draw the line in the sand?
Ooh, let's see. That is a tough one because I feel like I'm at this crossroads. Um, let's see. Where do I draw that line? You know, I'm gonna say boundaries. When I have set a boundary, in the past, I may bend that a little. But if it's something that deals with, relationships moving forward or, at work, if a certain situation kind of keeps spilling over and, I've set a boundary and I keep letting this person or in my life and personal life or work, I actually don't tolerate that any longer, where I kind of stand up for myself and say, no, this is what I said. This is what we're going to do. And it's not being it's not about flexibility. It's more about setting that boundary for myself about what I'm not willing to kind of sacrifice anymore, if that makes sense. Like time with my children. I've gotten really better about my work life balance. And if I set a boundary where today I'm leaving early because I promised I'd take him to get a snow cone, then, barring any big emergency, I'm taking them to get a snow cone. So I think for me, it's boundaries, and I'm doing a really great job of creating healthy boundaries and not changing the path. So hopefully that's a good one.
It's a great one. Setting boundaries is so important. And the interesting thing is, I was always better at boundaries at work and with my children than with my husband. It has
Right.
been always the biggest battle. And so I want him to have boundaries. What are your boundaries as
Yes.
well? But it's interesting because later in life, I've had to quite stick and go, that is really stepping over that boundary. So I feel like I'm having more conversations the older
Yeah. Yes.
he gets
Yes. I agree with you.
than when they were younger. So I think sometimes the boundaries with our loved ones,
Yes.
we
Yep.
tend to give them more inches. And
Yeah.
perhaps we do need to look into ourselves and go, is this right? Is this how I want to be spoken to, how I want to be treated, etc. And just reinforce those boundaries at times as well. So thank you. I thought that was a really, really amazing answer. And of course, this is the
Thank you.
place where you are going to get the authentic truth.
Right?
All right. Cassie, thank you so very, very much for our time together. And in closing, I'm just going to read a last sentence from the book. I surround myself with motivated, positive women, learn from them, and show up for them professionally and personally. So, for all of you that have listened, I'd love you to take away one of those things today, whether it's coming back to being truthful to yourself. Where do those boundaries need to be set? Is it having that more of that, those listening skills again, even bringing them back to our family? Whatever that resonated with you, I'd love you to think about implementing that over the next week and see what changes that brings for you. So keep empowering until next time. Speak soon. Kath Malloy and Cassie Carson signing off. Bye for now.